Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my November wrap up. And if you're new here, this is where I talk about the books I read, the things I wrote, and some personal life tidbits. So I have my latte ready to go in my new Sagittarius mug because it is Sagittarius season and my friend bought this for my birthday. So let's get into the books I read. So in the month of November, I read 7 books total, which continuously blows my mind. And I know that they're all varying lengths, but I really can't believe sometimes that I read that many. So starting off, I continued into my horror obsession of October, and I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the second book I've read by him. This follows a group of people who, when they were younger, 4 of them went out and started hunting on these lands that they were not supposed to hunt on. They were sacred. And as they got older and years passed, they are convinced that they are being hunted by the elk mother that they shot and killed. And it is kind of like a little bit of like a and then there were none situation where they're like being picked off one by one, and also kind of just this creepy like spiritual Native American mythology around this elk and how sacred it is. And it was just really good. I read another Stephen Graham Jones like a year or two ago, and it was not my favorite. It was Night of the Mannequins, so I'm very excited to say that this one worked a lot more for me, and I am definitely willing to pick up more from him. Then I continued with my obsession with the Black Witch series, and I read the sequel, The Iron Flower. This is a direct continuation, and it takes place after the first book, where we're following Eleanor Gardner as she looks like her grandmother, the Black Witch, who pretty much decimated tons of other races outside the Gardnerian race. And she is kind of understanding that her grandmother's legacy is not all it's cracked up to be, and she does not want to be viewed as her grandmother's successor. And it's a great series. I'm obsessed. I gave this 5 stars. Truthfully, I just love this series so much. I did try to pause myself because the last book in the series actually doesn't come out until next November, and I found that out while I was reading the second book this month, and I was like, do I want to rush through them all or do I want to savor it? So I didn't read any more in the series this month, but it was hard not to. And then for my book club, we read The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boley, and this is another Native American author who wrote about her culture, and this takes place on a reservation that is kind of near the Canadian border and tackles the subjects about drug use and drugs being pushed on and off the reservation, and the politics of reservation law versus the rest of the United States and Canadian law, and how they don't always mesh very well. And it is a very hard-hitting book. There's a lot of things that became an awareness for me of something I didn't know was happening in the world. Even though this takes place in 2004, I can still see, based on the TikToks I get and the conversations I have, that it's still something that impacts people today. But it was a very well written book. I think I gave it like 4.5 out of 5 in my book club. For the most part, the book was excellent, and I would for sure read the next book by this author, which is kind of a sequel but not a direct sequel to this book. And then, I don't know, because I'm writing about vampires, I think I just got in a vampire kick, and my library hold came in, so I got The House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, and it didn't dawn on me until after the fact that I read this, that this is kind of like a retelling of, to be honest, I'm blanking on the name right now, and I can't even search for it, but basically the woman who was rumored to like bathe in the blood of maidens in order to have eternal youth, like the Countess. I can't remember her goddamn name, and it's gonna make me so mad, but y'all probably know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of a retelling of that, where this woman, Marion, goes into the House of Hunger, and the woman of the house, like the heir apparent, hires these blood maids in order to have a successful life. But there's definitely something dark and sinister behind the walls, and once Marion starts to uncover its secrets, she knows that she has to get out. And it was very good. I really like Alexis Henderson. I think I liked Year of the Witching just a smidge more, but this one was definitely worthwhile, and I would for sure read more in this world, but in general, like from the author. She's excellent. Then I got my physical copy of In the Interest of Letting Go by D.M. Cabral, or also known as Diane Marie on YouTube. And this is a really quick and easy poetry collection that chronicles romance and heartbreak and moving on. i.e. the interest of letting go. It's very well done. I really like that there's mixed media. I especially love the blackout poetry. I told Diane, talking to her, that I could just literally read a whole book of blackout poetry, especially because she includes journal entries that she actually wrote and then turned them into the blackout poetry. So you saw the before and after, and honestly, I think they're brilliant. Like, I'm not just saying that because Diane's my friend. Those were my favorite pieces in this whole book, and I probably won't shut up about it because I really, really like just how, I don't know how she discovered it, but she did it so well where like you read one thing and then she just had such a good way of turning it into the blackout poetry to have a new meaning, and really like that. But there are a couple poems that I really like in here. In general, it's a little bit shorter form poetry, and that's not always my favorite, but I did like a few of them and a few resonated with me. So if you haven't got it, definitely go get your copy. I think the physical copy is well worth the purchase, but there's also an ebook version as well. Then I read A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is Ava Reed's YA debut. I read Juniper and Thorn last year. It was one of my favorite books, so I really couldn't wait to see this dark academia style book for young adults, and it was good. It definitely was not my favorite book of the year by any means, but I really did enjoy it. I liked this. Really actually seemed more like a dark fairy tale story rather than a dark academia story. Yes, the two main characters are in college, and I also felt like that's kind of a cop-out to call this a YA when they're in college. It does seem like it should be more new adult, but again, we get into that debate every time. They're in college and the main character is studying architecture, but she really wants to be a literary major, and that is not something she could do because she's a woman. So we're very sexist in this world. And she ends up going to this home of one of the most known authors for fairy tales in order to kind of redesign the home, but she's there under the guise that she also wants to get closer to this author because she wants to be an author herself. So it follows them, and then also the secrets in this house and like the author's life and like the scandals that they start to uncover. And there is a little bit of a romance. The romance was not my favorite thing in this. Honestly, I feel like it could have been fine, and it probably should have been fine without the romance. But given that it's YA, I do kind of know that romances get thrown in there quite often. That's why I can't say this is my favorite. I thought the romance was kind of pointless. Otherwise, I liked the idea and the concept. The ending kind of wrapped a little bit too smoothly for me, but I also like some of the messages at the end of the book. So overall, again, I really like Ava Reed, even though this one might not have been my favorite from her. And then lastly, I also read Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld, and I am not going to talk to you about this, but I am going to acknowledge that I read it and hopes that you will watch the vlog that's going to be coming out soon that includes this. So just want to throw that out there. All right, and now this is where I really wanted to get my cozy drink and talk, because I wanted to talk about NaNoWriMo and writing in general in November, because back in October, I did kind of sort of announce I was going to do Nano, and then I found myself in an extreme burnout. Now, writing burnout is not something I thought I would find myself in ever, because I don't write every day, and it's not my job right now, and it's always something that I looked forward to. But as the month continued and I was really just struggling to focus with my attention, like sitting down, I'd get words down when I wrote, but I wasn't sitting down and like writing for hours like I kind of anticipated I was gonna do. I think that started weighing on me. And then I also had really high hopes of submitting a short story for Owl Crate. Owl Crate announced that they are going to be doing an anthology, and it's open invitation to submit. But when they announced that they will be opening their submissions, they kind of said stay tuned for more information, and then they never gave more information. And then suddenly on the Friday before the end of November, they sent an announcement saying, we're open for submissions, you have 1 week. So they gave 1 week, and then they also gave more information at that point about, like, you know, it has to have a romance, it has to be upper YA to adult, and more parameters that I was expecting. It also said they wanted 6,000 to 8,000 words, which is relatively high to write from scratch in a week. Because even though I was like thinking about the theme, I was really waiting for the rest of the parameters to make sure I was getting what they want. And that sent me into a spiral, because I really tried to force write a very large short story in a short amount of time, and I just hit that wall so hard. And I was hoping I could write the short story because I didn't really finish my NaNo novel either, and I just was really in my head. And unfortunately, that's when I realized that I was experiencing burnout because I was like lethargic. I was in a bad mood at work. I didn't sleep well. Like, it just really hit me so hard. And when I finally talked to a friend and I acknowledged that I'm like, I think my writing is doing this, it was like the switch flipped and I felt a little bit calmer all of a sudden. I was like, oh man, here we go. So I decided by the end of November I was taking a break. It wasn't going to be an extensive break. Like, I wasn't taking months off from writing, but I did need a few days to maybe a few weeks to breathe and let myself be like, it's okay, we're not actually on a deadline. Because over the year, I've been having so much fun writing short fiction that I think the pressure to like pump out my novel in the same way as I was pumping out short fiction was gonna happen, and that's just not who I am. So even though I was kind of aiming for a soft 35,000, I got about 15,000 written in my NaNo novel, which is Project Vampire, and I'm completely content with that. I'm happy that I'm chugging along as I am going, and I know that that book is gonna be done, and it's gonna be done well instead of rushed and panic stricken. Similarly, even though I didn't continue writing the short story and I didn't finish it, I also wrote about 2,000 words of a new short story. So I have that in my back pocket to go back to and finish. And that's also another vampire short story. Told you, vampires on the brain. And then I also dabbled in some more poetry. I wrote a new poem, I edited some poetry, I put together a mock poetry collection. We'll see where that goes. And I also submitted more poetry. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I feel like things like flash at me for certain reasons. And I saw that this new-ish online magazine was accepting poetry for their second issue. And I was like, this is a sign. So I kind of took the poems that I feel like I wouldn't ever end up putting in a collection because they're kind of like not the type of poetry I would have, at least in not my first collection. So they're more like a viewer like looking at something, or they're more like, I have kind of one that's sort of speculative, like it's about like an astronaut getting stuck in space. So like I have a couple of those, so I decided to submit them and we'll see what happens. I submitted them. And then I also decided to submit a short story to Stygian again. Stygian is doing an online zine, so they're doing like 2 times a year anthologies now with shorter fiction, and I had a story that I submitted for Apex. As you guys know, if you've been here, I knew it was going to get rejected immediately, but I thought that that story might work for Stygian instead, so I submitted that to them, and now we'll see. We'll see where anything goes, but that's essentially what the writing entailed for the month. It was a little bit chaos, and it was a little bit of a wake-up call for me that I was grinding way too hard for my own good. There's also the whole thing with NaNoWriMo. And I'm not sure, I don't know all of the information, and I'm not sure how many of my viewers even know too, but I saw somewhere a friend had sent me something, and then I saw a little bit here and there chatter about NaNoWriMo and their forums. So my understanding is that like there were some nefarious things happening on the forums with a moderator and minors. I think at some point the word grooming was used. I also think at some point there was something about like they were being redirected to have conversations off the forum. So basically the moderator was abusing their power. Allegedly. I do not know if this is true. Obviously, NaNoWriMo had sent an email out saying that like they're investigating things and nothing has come up right now, but they're closing the forums while they continue to do a deeper investigation. So there's something clearly going on. I didn't even know NaNoWriMo had forums, to be honest. This was just not something, I don't really use Nano, and I'm not a super involved in the community. The only time I really got involved in the community was in 2018 when I didn't have a writing group. I wasn't on YouTube yet, and I was looking for camaraderie while I write my novel because Nano was always a solo thing for me. And then I found out that there were communities, local and otherwise. So I joined really then, but I again only joined my local group. I didn't really participate on the website. I'm also notoriously terrible at using the website because I hate it. I think it's so not user-friendly. It's not very appealing, and there are also other websites I could use to track my novel progress if I wanted to use it, because that's all I really used it for. So with all of that going on, I also kind of felt a little weird using and talking about NaNo as often. And truthfully, I think I'm just gonna take this as my exit from using NaNo. I may still like try to write and do challenges, but I don't know if I'll talk about NaNo going further until whatever investigation ends, because it just makes me feel a little weird and icky about the situation. Because again, the words used were pretty intense allegations, and if they're true, it's pretty messed up, and it just seems like maybe the organization is not as organized as it should be. So there's that. That's pretty much all the writing and my thoughts on dumping NaNo, both like dumping the website and not using it anymore, as well as just abandoning my NaNo goal because it was just too much. So I'm okay with it. I've made peace, and that's just all that matters to me, really. So then moving on, we'll end with my personal life tidbits, and I don't really have a ton to talk about because most of November was me kind of like spiraling a little bit mentally, so I didn't do a whole heck of a lot. I did go out with a friend for dinner, and that was really nice. I went out for my cousin's birthday with some like family and friends, and that was nice. And most of the time, like anything I did was just involving food, so it was very chill. I did go see the new Hunger Games prequel, which was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I really did enjoy the movie, but this is also coming from somebody who is a die-hard fan of the series. I have videos on the prequel and my thoughts on it. I loved the prequel book. You are talking to somebody who is obsessed. I just think Suzanne Collins always writes with something to say. She has a very big focus on PTSD and war and the fallouts of like that whole like power dynamic. And I just think she's a very brilliant writer. She writes to a young adult audience where it's not talking down to them. And this is me on my soapbox. I can go on. So I really did think that the movie was relatively faithful to the book as far as trying to adapt it. But what I do think I had a problem with in the movie is that it was 2 movies. It should have been 2 movies. And I know that the director didn't want to split it up because he messed up and he split up Mockingjay, which never should have been 2 movies. But this book had 2 nice breaks in it where they could have slowed down the 3rd act. I know I watched somebody's video where basically they were like, I don't know how anybody could say the 3rd act was slow. Because the 3rd act is where Snow starts devolving into madness, and like, but not fully madness, but it's like that draw to power. Like he fully is like, I am going to take power. And he devolves into like the villain we know, but I felt like that wasn't executed very well because it was rushed. Like one minute he's like a peacekeeper and he's happy, and the next he's like mad and shooting people and going off the rails. So I didn't really like that execution very well. And overall throughout the movie, I also thought it was really hard to portray him as this gray character. And he was kind of sort of gray, but he always in the book was bad. Like he had these bad intentions. He always had this desire to be in control and take back and reclaim his name. So he was never really a good guy, but a lot of that was in his thought process. It was through a 3rd person limited view, which means like we were in his head only, and a lot of his thoughts were negative, and you just didn't really get that through the movie. And they kind of made him a little bit more wishy-washy, which was like, is he good? Is he evil? Is he like a sad character? Is he a bad character? Like you never fully knew. And that's the only thing I didn't really like about the movie, is I thought his character progression was a little bit bland. And my husband actually could back this one up if he were here, because he kind of said like, what was the point of this? Like we never really got Snow to pick one side or another. And in my head, I'm like, well, he did, but he was always this way, and it really wasn't shown in the movie. So as much as I liked it, and I did think in some ways it was like a perfect adaptation, like beat for beat, it just missed some of those key elements that the book really highlighted. Because ultimately the book was about the nature versus nurture and humankind and power. Like if humankind was left to their own devices, would we destroy each other or would we lift each other up? And I don't think that message was as clear in the movie. So I should have just made this a whole video, but I feel like there are so many videos that do a better job, and I will link them down below for you to watch, because your girl has just been watching that since the movie came out. I'm just so here for all of the Hunger Games discussions, and I'll also link mine down below too. And then as far as TV goes, we watched Gen V, which is a spin-off of The Boys on Amazon Prime. And I thought it was phenomenal. Again, with the social commentary and all of that. I think it was so well done. And if you can stand the gore and you like superheroes, I definitely think you should give it a watch, both The Boys and Gen V. And we also started Invincible, which is another superhero show on Amazon Prime. And I do really like both of them. So I've been having a good time with that. And that's pretty much it. So I wanted to keep this video like 10 minutes long. I don't know why I thought I was going to be able to do this when I get on soapboxes, but I am excited to tell you guys, if you missed my announcement, I'm going to be doing Vlogmas, aka Bree's version of Vlogmas, whereas I'm not really talking anything about Christmas or winter related, and I'm also not really doing vlogs. I'm going to give you guys 12 videos in a row. It is a pretty tough feat, especially because 2 of them are going to be reading vlogs, and I'm not always the fastest reader, and I did not start early on these vlogs. So I'm very much challenging myself, but this was actually the breath of fresh air I needed to kind of revive my spark, because I burnt myself out with writing. I'll probably burn myself out on video making after this, but I am taking a hiatus after I do my 12 videos. So starting on December 13th, you will get 12 videos from me, all regarding some writing things, some vlogs, some reading, and then some end of the year videos, like my favorites and my least favorites of the year. So if you are excited for that content, or you look forward to seeing it from me, since some of these videos I do post yearly, be on the lookout on December 13th at noon. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.